Hey guys, welcome to the second video of the Next.JS complete course. In this video, we will understand what a component in React is and the different types of components in Next.js. So let's understand what a component is. To understand what a component is, I've taken the React documentation and gone to your first component. So, React defines a component as a JavaScript function that you can sprinkle with markup. And this is how it looks. So, why are components so important in React? Components allow you to write lesser code and better code faster. How does it work? Let's understand. Let's say I have data coming from an API. And now I want to display that data. So in DOM or like in normal JavaScript, what I would have done is created a span tag and then done the inner HTML to be equal to the data. But with React, I don't need to do any of that. No need to do any of that. So how I do it is, let's create some dummy data. So let's say db text, and let's just say coming from db. How do I display it? So I'll say span, which stands for text, and say hi. So that's a component. But how do I display the db text? Well, I think I can use the variable name, but it shows me db text. How do I display what's the variable? So to display what the variable is, I need to add curly braces around this, which says coming from database. Now, this will also change when you change it. So this we will learn later is how to use state in React. But this is main. This is the main idea of components. So how do I use them? So isn't it just like HTML? Why do I need to use components? There's another use of components. If I scroll down a little, here you see we have a gallery which has an H1 saying amazing scientists and 3 profiles. And a profile is a singular component. So how do I work with this? So I'll copy my profile component from here. I'll paste it. After pasting it, what I'll do is I'll just, why is this giving me an error? Because I can't de-export to functions. So what I'll do is I'll create a profile. And now we can see coming from DB, coming from DB, coming from DB, because we have 3 profiles. And this is what components allow you to do. It allows you to nest components between one another. So how does it still work? So with normal HTML, you wouldn't be able to do this. But with this, you can. Now, there's another advantage. If I wanted to have some styles, I can just put it in one area instead of doing it multiple places. I'll just add margin right of 10. Now we have margin right. And so this is fine. But where else could you use this? You can use it for multiple purposes, like finding data, getting data, and displaying it to the user, loading components, button components, and many more. So you can create custom styles for your own components and show them in a bigger component or a page. So now that we understood this, how do components work in Next.js? So there are 2 types of components in Next.js. One is a server component and one is a client component. To understand these, let's go to a diagram. So this is a diagram and it shows a user going on their computer, going to a browser, typing a URL, and this URL sends a request to a web server. This web server does some calculations, sends in a response, and this response is shown by the browser and the user gets a result. So this is how websites work. Now, how do components work in server and client components? So a server component is when this user sends a request, the request is gone to the server. Now the server component renders the component. So it does the calculations, or it calls the database, in our case for the profile, and it renders the profile and then sends the response to the browser. And what happens in a client component? In a client component, what will happen is that the request will go to the web server, then the web server will just render the page. So it will send the page to the browser. The page will have JavaScript, which will call an API to get data from the database. And this data will eventually come to the client component. So there are advantages of both server components and client components. In server components, you don't have loading time for your users since it already comes from the web server calculated and rendered. But with client components, you can access browser-specific tools and APIs. For example, I want to use the user's camera. I can't do that as a server component because it's being rendered on the server. But if I wanted to access the user's camera, I can do that as a client component because the JavaScript is being accessed when the page has been loaded. So the browser's API can be used for the camera access. And these are the different types of components in Next.js. And we'll be understanding how to use these components in Next.js in the next video.